Mike, when we were discussing some of the topics for this panel prior, something that you had brought up is how future technologies, maybe even the question of like substitute materials could impact this space. I'd love to hear more from you on that.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's any commodity you pick, there's always a risk, to put it in inverted commas, of substitution, thrifting certainly, and that will always be the case. It's quite different in the rare permanent magnet space, just because the ability to move away from it is very limited, because there's always a trade-off. You know, we're currently rare permanent magnets being the absolute leader, you know, the most powerful, the most energy dense. It just makes perfect sense. So it's difficult to move away from that. That being said, you know, there is some, and I alluded to it in the presentation, Sean, you mentioned wind turbines. You know, in China, we're seeing a greater tendency to move towards some hybrid models, which are less intensive for rare earth demand. But again, that's not the case for everywhere. And I think if you were to zoom in and look on the EV side of things, and Christine, I probably pushed this question also to you, because I think you summarized it really well in your discussion earlier. There's always a trade-off. If you're looking to move away from rare earth permanent magnets to use, you know, normal induction motors, you're gonna see that drop in performance. So what else needs to step in and counter that to achieve the same sort of level of performance, essentially? So, Chrissy, I'm not sure if you want to add anything.
Well, yeah, I just would say, for example, for an EV drivetrain motor, the technology that's the most efficient is a permanent magnet-based motor, and in an EV, the drivetrain motor is, you know, a few hundreds of dollars, versus the magnet is still, you know, many thousands of dollars. And so if your drivetrain motor is even a few percent less efficient because you've chosen a non-permanent magnet-based technology, you have to make that up with either a drop in performance, lower range, or a bigger battery. And having a bigger battery is a very challenging trade-off. And for the rare earth space, the challenge isn't that the rare earths would be substituted because they're not cost effective. They'd be substituted if the concern about supply security continues to grow. And now that China, its own domestic consumption of rare earths is increasing, and they themselves are importing more and more of their rare earth supply, it gives China greater control to put a wrench in the ability of everyone else to decarbonize, to move to EVs and wind turbines. And so that risk of substitution is really on making a trade-off that would cede the technology leadership to China for those end products, which it really wants to export, not the magnets or the motors, but they want to export cars and wind turbines. And so it quickly elevates into that conversation when we look at substitution. So that's why, you know, projects, all projects that can proceed should proceed.
You all are teeing each other up so nicely. I'm not even needed, because William, we were talking exactly about this earlier, and thinking about China and how their industry is growing and how that might impact US industry growth. I'd love for you to chime in on this.
Yeah, so I think if we take a look at the last 6 months, specifically related to your point, that China wants to export electric vehicles and wind turbines. They're not necessarily worried about the precursors to those. So over the last 6 months, we saw the tariffs appear from the US on electric vehicles from China, and the EU followed suit with lesser controls, but still in tariffs. The direct response from China was to change the legislation about how the rare earth sector works. This wasn't a threat, it just was changing the legislation to track every ounce of rare earths throughout their entire industry. This puts control over their industry, which you know, just puts it at risk. I think we should be cognizant that they could shut off the rare earth exports without damaging their own economy particularly, but causing a huge issue for the rest of the world. And I think that we just need to recognize that we are in a different space, that rare earths can be a battleground should it need to be.
Yeah, and I will add, because I feel I'd be amiss not to, is I think that's something that will really dominate conversations over the next year or two in DC is what more can be done to protect this industry, but also when do those protective measures maybe go too far to hurt industry as well. And I think we'll be seeing a lot of grappling with that for rare earths in particular over the next couple years. So another topic that came up, and we haven't had a chance to get into it yet, but now I want to, is kind of the question of sustainability. So maybe, Sean, starting with you, I'd just love to hear, how do you guys talk about sustainability and the benefits of recycling, and then probably just work our way down the line.
No, of course. I don't think it's a newsflash to everyone that recycling of metals is typically a lower CO2 footprint or environmental footprint in general. But I mean, rare earths are particularly bad in terms of environmental footprint from mining. They have some of the highest CO2 equivalent emissions per kilogram of produced metal, and they have some of the highest land usage in the mining of them. Recycling clearly has negligible land usage compared to mining operations. And on the CO2 footprint side, actually Cyclic wanted to quantify that this past couple of years, and so we actually spent some time and did a third-party LCA this past summer, which we went through a panel review and got fully ESSA certified, and we found that through our process we're able to produce these rare earth oxides with a 63% reduction in CO2 relative to mining, and that's at our current demonstration scale. So as we grow and get higher economies of scale, we expect that CO2 footprint to go down per kilogram as well. And so we see recycling not necessarily ever going to be a replacement to mining, but able to kind of average down the environmental footprint that comes with utilizing these critical raw materials, as they are essential to the overall energy transition, as we've talked about in all the technologies that they're used in.
Okay, Christine, time
Yeah.
to rebuttal.
No, not rebuttal, I agree. I mean, right now, most of our rare earths are coming from China.
Yeah.
And the footprint of Chinese mining, including what they're doing in Myanmar, is enormous, both from a land point of view, water, CO2 footprint. And we need the recycling industry and as well new mine supply to come in to lower that footprint, because it is possible to mine and process rare earths in a much more in a way that reduces its environmental footprint. Just like any other mining, whether it's nickel, copper, cobalt, you can do it in an incredibly harmful way, or you can do it with respecting environmental, social governance, as well as community rights and in indigenous communities as well, where many of the rare earth projects and critical minerals projects are in the north of Canada, where there are indigenous communities. For us, our approach is that it's not a choice between being cost competitive and lowering our costs and having a better environmental footprint. Those things are very well aligned, because as we are able to reduce the cost of our production, a lot of that is in figuring out ways to be much more efficient, doing selective mining, processing much more efficiently. That reduces our energy costs, but it also reduces our CO footprint. It reduces our impacts across the board and water and everything else. So our focus is not that ESG is a cost of doing business, but it's a business advantage if, in our case, where we're building a mine and processing plant and building a company from the ground up, doing that from the beginning is actually very complementary to making a financially attractive project.
I want to make sure I open it to either
Yeah,
of you
so
as well.
from the Rare Earth Industry Association, it's very much that's the ethos of why we were established in the first place, to help develop sustainable rare earth supply. So the way we do that is we do fundamental research, looking specifically at establishing traceability, looking at standards associated to LCA within the rare earth context. There's some intricacies within rare earths that just need a little bit of analysis to make sure that we're reporting on the same footing each of the projects that come up here, and also benchmarking against China. So there's a number of initiatives that the Rare Earth Industry Association is involved with that we hope will lead to more sustainable production of rare earths.
I'm not sure there's
Anything
anything
to
left for
add?
me to say. I mean, I covered it perfectly. Maybe just two quick comments. I think traceability, very important, often overlooked, and I think that should be paramount. And then diversified supply base. And I don't just mean that geographically, I mean that from the perspective of different feedstocks, recycling, mining, and then adding in obviously the geographical layer as well. And that's how you ensure supply security regardless of where you are in the world, making sure that there's the right stimulus measures in place, the right projects come online, the right recycling streams are put in place just to make sure that that's all there and supply is secure.
Yeah, I love that you brought up traceability as well. I think that's something that we'll see grow in interest as well over the coming years, and raise even to your examples abroad as well. I think forced labor, environmental concerns, there's a growing interest in better understanding our critical mineral supply chains as a whole, and I think we're hitting on a lot of the different factors in that. So being cognizant of time, I think I'll end with one final question for each of you, which is, what excites you about this space? This can be either something at your company that you're excited about, or opportunities you guys see in the market that really leave you optimistic about where this industry is going.
Yeah, just to start with, I think it's the engagement that we're getting from not just the OEM space, that they're taking a real look at rare earths now, but governmental. It's really high on the agenda as a global picture and a global thing to look at. So I think that really excites me, that people are interested in it now. I think 3 or 4 years ago, we were not in the same space, and I think you'll both recognize that.
Others jump in, yeah.
I'd like to echo exactly what Will said. We get a lot of support from OEMs as well, and we see that they're trying to drive this shift to a diversified ex-China supply chain, and they're really willing to work with everyone in the industry to make that happen. Maybe another point to add on what I'm excited for is, we're a growing company, so we have a bright future in the next couple of years. We just raised money to expand into the US and to Europe, and so we have a lot of work to do, and it's all exciting work, and it's all in the name of building up this supply chain outside of China and to build it locally, domestically in each of the regions.
For me, I would just echo that point and saying bringing a rare earth project and being part of a growing rare earth industry, it's being part of the future economy as we transition from a fossil fuel-based economy to a mineral-based economy. We need to mine more materials, we need to recycle more materials, and having an opportunity to do that differently with a focus on cost, but also a focus on the environmental footprint and the benefits to communities with better paying jobs, opportunities for training and advancement, and building an ecosystem to support that in the future, not just in Canada, but in North America and with like-minded companies. And so it's exciting to be a part of that future that really makes a significant difference. And the last point I'll make is it's possible. If we work together, this is a solvable problem.
For me, very quickly, bringing it all back to where we are today, sat on the stage talking about rare earths. It's called the Rare Earth Spotlight Session. I'm glad it is. And for me, I'm excited about rare earths becoming a bigger part of the discussion moving forward in conferences like these, in side conferences, meetings, etc., for the industry as a whole, for it to have more of a light shined on it, I think.
Couldn't agree more. Well, thank you all for joining us. Hopefully you feel like you learned something from this. And please join me in thanking our panelists.
Thank you.